I'm delighted to introduce Mr. Donnie Barrett, who will talk about Fairhope stories and Fairhope pictures. Donnie?
Thank you, Catherine. That was good. I enjoy doing these, and this one's a real fun one. I'd written a book this past year, and that's what my book looks like. This is just a proof. I've not quite finished it yet. Catherine has proofread it 3 times, and she's just written all over it. And, you know, just because you open a parenthesis don't mean you have to close it. You know, little things like that, and she's been fixing those and helping me fix it. And when I was talking about this program, I thought I was going to talk about this tonight, but I'm not. I got a whole bunch of other pictures, and I got pictures that aren't really Frank Stewart's pictures. Some of them, there's a couple of them are, but they're pictures that I probably did not use in my book. We have a small group tonight, so if y'all have a question, just holler out. If you have a question. If you can't hear me, holler out, because I want y'all to not miss anything that we talk about. I had actually drawn it, and also I have 34 pictures here. That's really a lot. I could pull up one and just start talking, but I'm going to just kind of rip through them. So I'll give lots of time at the end, and we can discuss anything about Fairhope's history you would like to discuss. This little piece of artwork here, this is some of the artwork that I had drawn for my book. I did 14 little logo-looking artworks like this that I just sprinkled throughout the book in front of the chapters. And when I used to work at Print Excel, I used to draw logos and stuff when I worked there, and I learned how to do this. And in my book, there'll be lots of these. So let's rip down and look at some of the old Fairhope pictures. This first one is about 1908, and this is the Red Wharf. When they came here in Fairhope, they wanted to build a wharf, the first thing. It was important to be in contact with the rest of the world, and they built this Red Wharf. In 1910, the General Lee was tied up to it. The General Lee caught on fire, burned the wharf, and burned the whole end of the wharf off, and that's when they built the White Pier. And the White Pier is what you see in most of Fairhope's pictures. This is 1915. We know for several reasons the railroad track was laid there in 1915. And early in 1916, the Vanderslice blacksmith shop burned down. Now, they had bought that from Mr. Keller, and when it burned down, they sold it to Mr. Ludwig, who is right out here. In the driveway of the museum, and we have of the library, and in the museum we have Mr. Ludwig's anvil, which was in the Vanderslice. In the 1916 fire, we have a picture of that, and our anvil is sitting right there. Other things of interest is, look at those really cool light posts. Now, they had electricity here. Only about 2 years that they had electricity, but they got these kerosene lights. Things to look at is the livery here that Jim Gaston, E.B. Gaston's son, original town founder, had the livery, then auto, and then just auto, and then Gaston Motor Company it became, and then they moved up on the causeway up in the 4-lane in 1973. There's Mr. Coleman's house right there. There is the Pine Quat shop right there. And this is, in 1916, they rebuilt the pharmacy there. This is, you're looking up Fairhope Avenue, looking west toward the bay. This is Fairhope Avenue also. You would not recognize this. See, the tracks are there. That means it's between 1915 and 1923. Some things to notice there is this empty lot is where they were going to build the post office. This right here was Holland's drugstore. It's now Brenny's jewelry store. And it was built as Raji's mercantile. And that's Raji's house. His first mercantile is right there. The Klein's restaurant is right there next to the pharmacy. There is the the Wheelers Mercantile, and this little building right there. That's an interesting building. That was built in 1913. It was built by Judge Lowell, and he was a judge, a law office, and a justice of the peace, and a notary public. And that's now, it looks like a little add-on building. It's that bistro in between what used to be the Colony Shop and the what? Yeah, yes. And it looks like it was just added in between the buildings, but it was built there first. It's one of the oldest buildings on that street. When I was a little boy, that was Pink's Barbershop. Later became Vic's Barbershop. This is a picture of the People's Railroad. When they made this curve there, they tried to, this is Bancroft Street right there. Manic Realty sits right about there. And this is before they had built Bancroft Street. And when they built this curve there, they tried to lay the tracks, but they couldn't get them to lay right. They couldn't get the track to lay on it. So they laid it out in a straight line and hooked mules to it and drug it into a curve and then laid the track underneath it. How diabolical. You see there's two railroad cars here. There is a railroad car right there like we have in our museum, and there's the other one like that. Charlie Ingersoll, president of Fairhope Single Tax, did have two of those two at one time, and he let one of them get away from him. Also, this is the only picture where you can see the steering wheel in the People's Railroad. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? This is in 1915 when they built the People's Railroad. You can see how clean it is because there's no weeds and grass on it. That is not very old. Things to notice here is the tall smokestack, which wasn't there for very long. The 1916 hurricane took it off, as well as this bathhouse right there. I didn't mean to go, wrong button. This bathhouse right there blew down in the 1916, as well as the big slide right there. This is the Wharfinger's house. And the Wharfinger had these windows on both sides so they could see who's coming and going. Wharfinger is the name of a person who takes care of the wharf and collects the money, the landing fees when someone lands there. And in my book, I said there's that cute concrete curb that later got torn up, and here gives a good picture of the curb after they tore it up when they built the People's Railroad and split the warehouse in half. You would never guess where this is. First, there's no trees there. This is Morphe. It sits right in front. Morphe right here. At this time, this is 1921. The People's Railroad ends right here at Morphe at School Street. This is the corner of School and Morphe. This is the Allen home. And the Allen home had named their home Central Park. It just doesn't look like Fairhope, does it? That place now has oak trees this big. And you can see a pine forest coming up over here. And this place is covered with huge oak trees. They grow a lot faster than what we think they do. This picture is, I thought it was a lot older. I thought it was the 1930s when they had the ball field down at the park. And this is one I just photographed. We tried to buy this picture on eBay, and we thought we had it within about 8 minutes or 3 minutes. Someone upped it 15 cents, and they got the picture. That's the way you do it on eBay. And so before it went off, I just photographed the screen so I'd have a picture of the ball field there. But I know it's before 1916 because that bathhouse was blown away in 1916. This Saturday, we're having a tour down at the Bay. It's our Bayshore tour. It's the tours that the Alabama Department of Tourism showcases 33 cities in Alabama at 10 o'clock on Saturday and every April. Ours this next Saturday starts at the Rose Garden and ends at the Manure Wharf. Can't wait to see that, can you? Y'all come see, and I'll tell you all about the Manure Wharf. This is the Playhouse Theater. Later, it was built as a magnet theater. Then it was the Playhouse Theater. Then it was called the Fairhope Theater. And it burned down in 2011. And actually, it was these beams up there that caught on fire. But look at this, this deco type art stuff in there. If you come in the museum and you look at the little chairs we have upstairs at theater seats, you can see that little design right there on the side of those seats. And we have a small section of those in our museum, and I cannot explain why Barrett is carved on one of the handles there. The only name on all those seats is Barrett, and me and my two brothers swore that we would have never done it. My mother's a school teacher, and she wasn't allowed stuff like that. And we don't know how it got there. We don't think we really did it. I really don't know how we did it, although it looks just like the way we write. This is inside. I just threw this in because I used to go to the Fairhope hardware store lots as a boy, and I worked with Robert Baker right there. Robert Baker and I worked together for almost 30 years. I got where I saw him grow up to be an old man as he saw me. I got to know his children. We went to picnics and stuff together. This is Mr. Yin right there. I wanted to buy some, we were going to go deer hunting, so I went to buy some buckshot shells, and he just turned right around and called up my daddy. Just that quick, saying, "Is it all right for him to have these buckshot shells?" And he let me have them. And then I worked a long time with Jack Oberg right there, Jack Oberg. And, of course, we knew all these people, and I have their names written at the museum. This is, let's see, you'll find the kiln pottery right there. You'll find Buck's diner right there, and this is 1964 when they moved the Clump Motor Company from down by the bay, down by Knoll Park. They moved it uptown, and it was really uptown and swanky, and it didn't stay there very long. It went out of business. You will find let's see, you'll find the Windmill Market in the back of this building now. This is the Confederate Rest. This was real interesting. They had made little hilts for grave markers. And these are hilts of a sword with about that much blade on it. And across the hilt, it had a little square area where they had stamped the men's name on it. And they had marked the mass graves there. They had 3 trenches, and as people died in the hospital there, they filled the graves up as they did, putting their heads on beds of sawdust, they said, and then they would fill the grave up as they buried the people down there. During the Depression, someone stole all those markers to recycle them. And then right after the Civil War, the hotel burned and burned all the records. And they don't know who the people were there. They don't know who was buried there. Right now, if you come up with some type document that says, yes, my relative is buried there, then they will get you, the military will buy a gravestone, and they will install it there, and they probably have about 40 there now of people who've testified that their relative is buried there. But what happened is when they came along in the 1930s and they built this wall, they built it in the wrong place. Because if you'll notice, there's no graves over there. The mass graves run off into that area, under that wall, run out over there. That's a mess. And they got them staked out now, and that's a mess. They also noticed that around this gate out here, see where that fence is right there, during the time, black families weren't allowed to bury in white cemeteries, which doesn't make sense. And so a lot of the black families who lived there wanted to be buried in cemetery. They buried their dead all around the trees on the outside there, which later became a golf course. Ground-penetrating radar shows graves all over the outside there, buried in the edge of the woods. Now, is that a mess or what? And they can't, they don't know how to figure it out. If they had some way of figuring it out and fixing the atrocity there, they would, but they can't. Another atrocity is they have this iron, it's an iron British barbette carriage. It had nothing to do with the Civil War, and it has a Parrott rifle on it over Confederate rest. Robert Parker Parrott made those rifles to destroy the South, and now it stands guard over the Confederate dead. Is that wrong or what? Is that wrong? They can't fix these atrocities. We had a lady, Miss Schramm. Miss Schramm started building this house in the 1920s. And first it was a plywood box up in the trees with chicken wire around the bottom where she had her chickens. She had a sign there that said, do not come up or disturb. And she got to be known as the Bird Lady because she had lots of other animals too, other geese and stuff like that. But she started daubing mud all over her house, and someone said, "Why don't you do that with concrete?" So she started adding on to it. Now, we've got pictures of it. This house is quite developed with arches out front, full walls out front, but this is about halfway through the process. If you look right there, you see a tree stump. See how that tree's standing there? And some of these trees there are green, and she just cut them off and started adding to them. And what happened is in 1943, she was sick and she was in hospital and she died in Mobile. And at the same time she died in the hospital, the whole thing had just collapsed because it was cement on top of green wood, which, you know, the bugs just ate it right up. This is right across the street from where the St. Lawrence Catholic Church is today. There's that, I think it's a radio station, Catholic radio station. It's sitting right on the top where Miss Schramm's house once sat. This is an interesting picture of the pier. I had one way of dating it because they had announced in the paper, thanks to Catherine who sends me all this stuff, when she runs across it, we knew that they had electrified the pier by this time. And so I just guessed 1927 because in 1927 they built the Mobile Bay Causeway, and it caused hundreds and hundreds of people to come to Mobile for a 4th of July celebration. So this is likely a 4th of July celebration with so many people that has come from Mobile. There's lots of things we could also point out in that picture that's of interest. And we were talking about the red versus the white pier. That is the white pier right there, which was, let's see, it lasted the 1926 hurricane, and the 1936 tropical storm damaged it, and they tore down the pier and the white pier in 1936. This is a picture quite interesting. It has Zeller House right there. I have no idea what Zeller House. I even went through phone books and city directories. I couldn't find Zeller on anything. Y'all could help me with that. It's interesting. In the 1920s, they planted these pindo palms. Pindo palm is also called a jelly palm. And when I was a little boy, the whole Fairhope Avenue was lined with these huge palm trees that had these great big fruit all over them. We dare not eat them. We thought they were poisonous, but they turned out to be quite good. We have them by the museum now, and I encourage people to get them out. I'll say, you can eat them, you can eat them. They all stand there, and when I put one in my mouth, then they will put one in their mouth. Right, when my wife and I, when we first got married, our house sat right here, right in front of where the Zeller House was. There's other things in there we could point out. This was called the Dixie Hotel at that time. There's another picture coming up where they call it the Dixie Hotel. This is Fairhope early in its history. There are things to notice that this became Brad's. I don't know if they built it on top of it and it became the Walkers. I don't know if they built that building or tear it down. They can add on to buildings to the point where you can't tell if the old building's inside the new one or not, and I can't tell that. This is just right when they had pulled up the railroad tracks. This is right when I used to be able to count the struts on the poles. You could tell through the years how many, they start adding more wires and adding more wires, getting up both sides of the street. Sidewalks here were started in the early 1920s. And this is just an nice old picture of Fairhope. Here's another picture. This is more of my time. This was when they had put this beer can covering on the front of the Fairhope Pharmacy. The Fairhope Pharmacy was made in 1916 with sand made from the beach, and it was very porous sand. And the building never sealed very well. Then it had all kinds of leaking problems, all kinds of moisture problems. Even the paint just peeled off the wall on the inside. And from necessity, they put this covering on the outside. It blew off in Hurricane Frederick in 1979. People were astonished to see this beautiful old building, and they put that I call it a beer can covering because it's an aluminum covering. They put it back on there in 1979, and after Hurricane Ivan, it blew off again, and Bill Barnhill went to the trouble. They had modern sealers to seal the Fairhope Pharmacy so that they could leave it exposed, and they put the parapet back on the top of it, and they have restored that building. There's a lot of buildings in Fairhope they could restore like that. Ben Barnhill, who's who's not really a fan of historic preservation, has done one of the best preservation efforts in our town by rebuilding the Fairhope Pharmacy. At this time, in 1951, this had become Bedsoles. And let's see, that's still McKean's Hardware. You see that sign right there? We have that in our storage. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. We'll do something with it someday. Notice that during this time they had stoplights that had 4 lights on it. The bottom one was red all the way around, so when the fire signals went off, where our museum is today, they would switch the switch and turn all the lights to red, and that they thought that was just great, and it didn't last very long. This is a picture, and I know that the soda garden was put in there in 1940, right here. Walker's had just moved in there in 1941. Here's what the pharmacy looked like, what it looks like today. And you can still see there's one of those palm trees there that completely line Fairhope Avenue. And look at these beautiful lamps like that, these posts. They had a whole pile of those out behind the cemetery in the public works area. The sewage treatment plant is behind the colony cemetery. They had a great pile of these, and one of the people that helped install them years ago got the city to get 2 of them out. They got out the best ones, they got out the globes, and they've installed them. So 2 of these lamp posts are installed, look just like that in front of the Welcome Center now. You'll walk right by them and not notice them, but notice them. They're absolutely beautiful. I wish they were all up and down Fairhope Avenue. In front of the Welcome Center, they have those street lights. They reinstalled some of those street lights there. They've probably been there about 12 years now. And they're old and deco, and you wish they were all over town. This is a picture in 1958. I want to point out the Piggly Wiggly is right here. And other things to notice is the projection house that was built on top of the Fairhope Theater. I found out it was 1958 because that movie right there, Thunder Road, came out in 1958. And let's see, there's a Central Cafe. The Central Cafe is painted pink in this picture. And actually, at one time it was called the Co-op Cafe because this building right here was built as the Fairhope Cooperative Mercantile. And that was in the late 20s. And they built it right next to it the Co-op Diner. And this building actually was a Co-op Diner. And then it's been the Pixie and the Dixie and just a whole row of other things. Let's see, it was the pub and what is it? Bone and Barrel? I don't know. Yeah. No, this is the Fairhope Hardware store now. This is what we call in Bone and Barrel. You know, the little restaurant that's there. Let's see. Saratoga Trunk Inn is still there. I was going to point out something else, whatever that might be. We'll see it later. This is another picture of downtown Fairhope. I really enjoy the downtown Fairhope pictures. This building here is there now. It was there. This is Gaston Ford, and that was built in the 1920s. It's a real deco style building. And it's amazing that the glass hadn't been busted out of it and they haven't done away with it. Look at this portico that's over this service station there. They used to sit out there all by itself, and it was just real striking. And it's just too bad that things like that aren't still there. This Pure Oil sign sat on the corner there. There was another one like it that sat in front of where Sandra's is now, where that little service station was there. And this one is it's now out on, what's that, Twin Beach Road? It sits out on Twin Beach Road where a man had started a antique store, and it just went out of business, and that sign is still there. 32, okay. I had taped my business card to it one day and said, call me, but I haven't heard from him. I did that too with one of the engines that created the turning generators behind the museum, sitting down at the end of Greeno Road. I put my card on it and told them to call me because I'd love to, have that sitting behind the museum, but they ain't called me yet. One thing I want to point out on this is the building that Pittman had built in, he bought the store in 1920 and 1929. He rebuilt it with this Clay City brick. Look at these, the windows there. Look at these, the crenellated top. It's even more fancy than what you really see in this picture. But these windows right here, these round windows, you can go inside the Cat's Meow now and look up on the wall on the backside and see that fancy brick window there. And they really did a little more than in 1951 when they made it Bedsores. They just boxed it. They just boxed it in to make it look more modern. Let's see. There's a few other things there we talk about. Let's move on. I want to go quickly. When I was a little boy, we went to the First Baptist Church. This was the Second Baptist Church. The first one is now a classroom down there on the University of South Alabama campus by where it used to be the old Episcopal Church. There was a church building down there that started the Episcopal Church, it started the Baptist Church, it started the Methodist Church. Most of the churches in town had been using that at one time. It had the steps out front, the belfry, and the double entrance, just like standard churches have. But they have torn off the belfry and the whole front of it and finished it off with just aluminum windows, and you can't tell that it was once a church. But this is a church that I went to church in as a little boy. It was made with Dyson block, and let's see, it had stained glass windows in it, which are interesting. I remember that the Sunday school rooms is right here, and the big room is right there. And my mother said, okay, you're going to go to Sunday school, I'm going to sit here and wait. And I was horrified. But now when I go into Theater 98, I realized that she was sitting here and I was only there. I was only that far away. But I guess I was young and sensitive. This is the Theater 98 building. It had, back in the back where the sound is, the glass is still there. In the back, you enter the back of the church, and the pulpit was up front. Well, it had, like Baptist churches would have at that time, they had a big glass box up over the pulpit, up high, and it had bulrushes all planted in it and papyrus-looking things. And when they had baptized people, they filled up with water, and they'd baptize them, and you could see their gown floating all around in the water, and they'd pull them up and say hallelujah. Very impressive, for a 3-year-old, We enjoyed that. And that glass is still there in Theater 98. Being such a preservationist, I want to go get it and save it. Okay. I put this picture of Red Bluff in there. I have no idea what year this might be. This is during the sunset, so you got a lot of, crenellated light. You got a lot of fuchsia and purple and pink light on it. And it was always real shallow out there. You could never approach these areas by a boat because there was so much erosion. Now, to preserve real estate up there, there's houses all along here, and they have put piling. They have planted kudzu and privet and exotic plants of all kind. And when you go out in the water, you can barely see on Sea Cliff. On Sea Cliff, you can see a little bit of red dirt, but on Echo Rouge, this is Echo Rouge, you can't see any red dirt at all. It's completely stabilized. And when I was a young man, we used to sail by those, and we'd sail by them, and we used those as navigational beacons because you could really tell where you were when you saw those. This is a picture of the 1920s of the school. This building right there, which is still there, that's where Marietta Johnson actually started her school. This is one of the Stapleton houses. Let's see, let me orientate myself here. Yeah, right here's the Bell Building. You barely see the Bell Building. You see the little belfry right there. This is a Stapleton house right there. This is Leo Keller's father's house. This was Cummings Hall right here. Cummings Hall was the auditorium for everybody. Everybody in town used it, public school, organic school, any basketball games, visiting teams, Halloween haunted houses, everything took place in Cummings Hall. They didn't tear it down until the Faulkner campus was being, no, that's right, they tore it down before that. Gosh, that would probably be about the first of the 70s as they tear down Cummings Hall. The rain just poured through the roof when you played basketball in there. If it was raining, you got rained on in there, but they still played basketball in Cummings Hall. This picture was taken on top of the water tank that once sat there. They called it aerial photography. Frank Stewart would get up on top of the water tank and take pictures of the town about every other year. And we can really tell when things happen because we can date a lot of his pictures. You can tell when buildings were built. That's where a lot of my speculations and information come from, because I could tell when things were built by the sequence of Frank Stewart pictures. That's interesting. This is Mobile Bay Causeway. It's far-fetched from Fairhope, but I just want to point out that when they built the causeway, they built these concrete arches over like that, and it had Cochrane Bridge painted on them. One of those stayed over there by the Scott Paper Company for many years, up until almost recently. I think in 1979, after Hurricane Frederick, they finally hauled it away, but it was there for many years. The whole causeway was called the Cochrane Bridge. They didn't realize what an environmental disaster the Cochrane Bridge did. They didn't do any studies on wildlife or the impact on the environment. They just said, build the bridge. Let's get us across there. And what they did is actually they built an earthen dam across the 5 rivers that proceed there, and it kept many things happen environmentally. It caused the extinction of many plants and animals, but the main thing that it did, it stopped the salt water from getting back up into this area right there. And when you drive across the causeway, notice all these islands up here have trees all over them because the salt water is supposed to go up on those islands and kill all the trees so that the indigenous plants and snails and small things that are supposed to grow there that help fertilize the estuary can take place. So it stopped the function of a great amount of the estuary. It caused all kind of silting problems on this side. It caused heavy rocks to go downstream. When all the pressure built up behind places like this, it forced the river to shoot the sediment called detritus, to shoot the detritus out, and it would shoot sand out over to cover all the grass beds and kill all the grass beds that were out in the bay. Big disaster. Nowadays, they would have to do 25 years of research before they could do something like that. And maybe that's best. This is a picture. I couldn't really date it. The bay was never blue like that. The piers were never bubblegum pink as in these type pictures. What I want to point out right here is this area right there. That's the end of the Swift track. That is not public property. Now the beach covers across that. The duck pond goes across that. The city doesn't own title to that. There are several people and personal property holders that own title all the way down to the beach. When I was a little boy, there were piers here. There were piers and pier houses all out there. We thought, how can they have that on the beach? Little by little, they went away, and the people, for whatever benevolent reason, thank you to them, they didn't build on it, but the city has been grumbling about that now because they know that beach down there, that a big slice of it run right through the middle of it is privately owned by other people. Didn't know that, did you? They're trying to keep it a secret. I just let it out, didn't I? All right, this is a picture. It was dated 1937, and there are several things to notice. The pine quat shop there at the bottom. Look how this is Sandra's. It was called the Mecca Service Station at the time, and it's just sitting out there all out in the open by itself. The Gables is sitting here beside it. That was one of the first hospitals in town. This is the Berglund's house. The Berglund's house had been sitting up here where they built the theater. They drugged the Berglund house back there. They didn't tear that down until right by the time they built Mary Ann's Deli there. This is, let's see, which Brown? C.K. Brown. That's Mr. Brown's house right there. Trees start in this area. This area back there was, this area back here was called Stack's Hollow. You'll have trees in this area right through there that are older than the others, including the gully and down the bay, including Knoll Park, including up to the K1 Center and back. And that area right there was called Stack's Hollow. And William Stack did not allow them to cut it in 1888 when the W.D. Smith Company from Stockton came and clear-cut our entire area. When they built the hospital in 1961, previously to that, the hospital was right across from the museum. It was called the Jordan Clinic. My wife and I were both born at the Jordan Clinic, and they shut it down. So Fairhope would not have a hospital in 1960, so they could apply for grants, and they built, with all the doctors' helps in town, even people like Clarence Bishop, other town-minded people, all got together to build the Thomas Hospital. And that's it. That's the whole thing. You could walk right through. This is the, you walk right through that outdoor and you're out in the backyard. It was just that small. I was being babysit right over here by Miss McKibben. Miss McKibben said, you know, they're going to build a hospital out here. We were going out here at these pecans. We were out here in the pecan fields, and she was showing us how the squirrels would bury pecans, and you could find them and dig them up, and you'd have a perfectly good pecan. And she said one day, you know, they're going to build a hospital out here. And we thought, isn't that silly? Nobody's going to want to come out here and go to the hospital. They're going to want to go downtown where the doctors are at. And all that's still there, but it's all buried in this huge, humongous hospital that we're so lucky to have now. That hospital is a treasure. Small towns like ours don't have hospitals like the Thomas Hospital, and I always tell people thank the single taxers for that wonderful hospital. This is another view of downtown Fairhope. This is what it looked like when I was a little boy. Again, there is the Central right there. This had turned into Bill's Dollar Store. And what else does it look right there? This was the Electric Maid right there. You can't quite see it. Where is it? Right, yeah. In this picture, you can't see it. But right there, it became, it was Lowell's Bakery. I remember Miss Lowell always had flour all over. I think she just put it on like makeup in the morning. And she would, whenever you come to order something, she'd lean over the counter so she could hear you. And I swear she had flour on her, and I knew her for 20 years. But it still has on that sign out front, Electric Maid, M-A-I-D, the Electric Maid. Which, you know, when electricity came out, anything made with electricity they thought was just absolutely wonderful. It helps me to date pictures with the straight legs in the tower. When they built that first tower there in 1915, it had angular legs. And they built that one in 1936, so it helps date pictures sometimes when you see the legs of the water tower. This is let's see, Claude Arnold's sister, Buckerite, Elsie Arnold Buckerite. This is Elsie right there. And you can almost see that smile in her face. That's still her, dressed as a mermaid. And I wish she knew I was showing this. She'd be real pleased. She would think it was scandalous. So what I did is I included another scandalous picture here. This is the only picture of nudists we have in Fairhope. Now, if you were digging through your grandmother's stuff and you found a picture of her naked on the beach, what would you do? You would destroy that picture. You don't want people to see pictures of your grandmama naked on the beach. And and then also, you don't really want to go around with cameras taking pictures of nudists. But Fairhope had nudists here in several places, and we have lots of documentation on it. Even Daphne said, we will not allow the people of Fairhope to attend our May Day festivities because we don't want people coming here in the buff. They did. They passed an ordinance in Daphne on that. Oh, that's Wharton Esherick's family in 1920 and 1921. Wharton Esherick was here as a painter. Marietta Johnson said, I need somebody to teach wood crafting. And she gave him chisels and stuff for him to practice with. Then he became America's most famous wood carver. And there's all these classical pieces by Wharton Esherick. He quit painting. It made his paintings very valuable. They have one in a facility here that's appraised for $5 million. Okay, this is a young man. This is one of my friends was Rusty Goodard. This is Rusty Goodard's mother. They call her Bud. Her name was Buddy Goodard. And this is her brother right here. And I know Buddy for a long time. This is her brother Barney. Barney was the sweetheart of Fairhope. I had this one lady said he was the Prince Royale of our city. And they just thought the world of Barney. And Barney graduated from the organic school in 43. He was 18 in 1943. And Barney went off and joined the Army. Here he is in Santa Barbara, California. He went to train there, and actually this picture is taken in Hollywood. He's arrived in Hollywood, Hollywood, and he was just having a wonderful time. There's lots of writing on the back of this picture. Barney signed up to be a pilot. And by the next year, he was flying P-47s. P-47s is the Thunderbolt flying. They called them, they were dive bombers. They were the most powerful plane that was used in World War II, and they were real powerful dive bombers. Huge engines, small planes, heavily armed, and Barney was piloting one of those. This is a picture of his squadron. This is after they had gone, after D-Day, they were right behind him, and they landed in France. And in some of their writings, they said that they would clear the runway, and as soon as they cleared the runway, they were in the battlefield, and they were getting shot at because they were just that close to the Germans. In a town called Sivry, the Germans, their plan was to put the B soldiers up on front, leave the A strong soldiers in the back, and when the Allies broke through the B soldiers, they would bring in the A team to push the Allies' way. That's what they were going to do. That started to focus in Sivry, France. As the Germans were bringing up their troops, getting them in position, they told the people in Sivry, move your farm vehicles, turn your cars over, and get out of town. And over that ridge on Sivry was shaping up a major battle. Well, as the Germans were getting in place, Barney dove bomb. Is that a word? He dove bomb. Barney would attack the half tracks and the tanks as they were getting into place, and he tore up the tracks, and he tore them up as the other tanks tried to get around him. They started getting stuck in the mud, and he stymied the whole German getting in position. The Allies moved through, and the battle never happened. But Barney clipped a tree while he was doing that and crashed, and it killed him. He killed him there in Sivry, France on August the 23rd. They have because what happened, they threw his body out clear of the plane, and his plane burned. A girl barefoot with a flowery dress on went out and put flowers on his body, thanking him for saving Sivry. And now they have hundreds of yards of ladies in barefoot with flowery dresses carrying huge bouquets. They even have one of the half tracks still shot up by Barney that has a light shot out of it if they drive in that parade every year. They have a whole museum. They've got the bullets. They got pieces of his plane. They got all this stuff that they could gather. They even got the scarf that was around his neck. And all kinds of items. We had his flight helmet, and the man that took this picture was a Mr. Holyfield. He would borrow it, and then he'd give it back to the museum, and when he went to do a show, he'd borrow it, and he'd give it back to him. Well, lo and behold, he borrowed it, and then he died, so we lost that. Barney liked the British flight helmets. They were sewn kid leather with red and white, and I wish I hadn't lost that, but we did. And so Barney was killed on August the 23rd. If you want a hero's welcome, go to Sivry, France on August 23rd and tell them you're from Fairhope. They will fight over who's going to wine and dine you. They will fight and they will praise you. And we have several people from Fairhope who go there every year. And the warmest welcome is still being extended. Now, what's wrong with this picture? It's not Fairhope. No, it's not Fairhope. This is Gulf Shores, and this is a promotional picture made. Today I went to we had our museum, we had one called the Jubilee, and it had a picture of a rocky shore. It had a picture of brown and yellow mud. It had a picture of people catching big old trout-looking fish. And you say, I can name like 8 or 10 things wrong with that picture. Well, we sold them all in the museum, and they're all gone. I wish I'd had one. It was such a scandal. But this is the last slide that I'm going to show tonight, just because it's, I enjoy seeing the sailor tying knots. for tying knots for the amusement of the ladies. You know. Try that nowadays. Try that, sailor, and see what that gets you. That comes to the exciting conclusion of what I wanted to talk about tonight. That was just a wild and exotic mixture of all kind of Fairhope pictures, ranging in about 120 years.